I knew that some of the hardest workers that I had worked with and met were over in Metropolitan Division. You could be protecting the president one day, the Dalai Lama's coming to town, just high visibility people.
In just about every police department in the United States, the sole responsibility of a field training officer, also known as an FTO, is to properly train police officers fresh out of the police academy. It's a job that carries a lot of leadership and responsibility to ensure that new officers are prepared to tackle the challenges of their profession. And few know this better than our special guest today, Chris Yzaguirre, affectionately known as Izzy in the force. He's dedicated close to 32 years of service with the LAPD. During his time, he spent 13 years as an FTO, developing officers to reach their maximum potential and making them confident in their ability to serve and protect. This isn't just about training, it's about shaping the future of law enforcement. Don't just take my word for it. Two of his probationers that he trained had this to say about Chris. Take a look.
How you doing? My name's Rick. Thanks, Marlon, for letting me come on your podcast and give a shout out to one of your special guests, Izzy. How's it going? Congratulations on your retirement. So happy for you. Just wanted to thank you for everything you did for me when I was a rookie cop 27 years ago, and you were my field training officer. I learned so much from you. I remember a conversation we once had where, you explained to me in this profession, when you make critical decisions, it could mean the difference between life and death, not just for yourself, for your partner, a member of the community, and that really stuck with me. It had a huge impact on my career. I remember many years later down the line, I became a field training officer as you were, and I remember I used a lot of your knowledge and your training to train the probationers assigned to me, knowing that I would have a similar lasting impact on them in their future. And, I thank you for that. So I hope to join you in retirement very, very soon and wish you all the best. Take care.
Hey, Chris, it's John Ferreria, one of your probationers back in 1997 at Foothill. Two things. Congratulations on your retirement, number one. And number two, thank you. Thank you for being tough on me. I learned a lot from you. And two of the most important things that I learned that carries with me, that resonated with me throughout my entire career, is that number one, my reputation preceded me, and number two, don't stand around and get to work. Because of that, I was successful, got to work all kinds of different assignments: Venice Beach Detail, Crash, Fugitive Warrant Section, the Marshals Task Force, and South Bureau Homicide. That success continued after retiring from LAPD and now a captain at the Monterey County District Attorney's Office. I also took those teachings and applied it to my personal life as well, having gone to school and graduating from law school. Thanks, Chris.
Chris is definitely a mark of a true mentor, making a lasting impact on the lives of those they train. But Chris's journey hasn't been without its challenges. His career saw ups and downs, including an internal affairs investigation that set him back from reaching his ultimate destiny, LAPD's elite Metropolitan Division. But Chris persevered, eventually promoting to sergeant and continuing to lead by example. Today, we'll get into the details of that investigation and Chris's experience. So without further ado, let's get into the conversation with not only a colleague, but a personal friend of mine. Welcome to Internal Affairs, a police podcast. Let's do this. Welcome back to Internal Affairs, a police podcast. Chris Yzaguirre. Before we actually start, we actually try to do this on Zoom. And you know what? I got to tell you, you deserve more than just, what were you, in your room or something like that?
I think we were in the parlor of my residence. That's what the wife calls it.
There you go.
It's
and you know
study.
what? And you and I just agreed and said, you know what? You just got to come in the studio. And I appreciate you coming all the way back down to California, and we'll talk about that later.
Sure.
But we appreciate that. Before I start, let me just make some couple announcements. For one, Look, 12 Seconds in the Dark by John Manley. It's a really, really good story for you to read. Buy it on Amazon. It's a story about Sergeant Manley out in Louisville with the Breonna Taylor raid. Get it. It's a quick, easy read. You'll enjoy it. It's good stuff. The Titan Group, Professional Investigations. Look, if you want any type of investigations, where they're going to be workplace, complex investigations, internal affairs, firefighters, et cetera, please look them up on the YouTube channel. Their website is the link on that channel. And last but not least, you do know that if you don't know by now, I am a law enforcement instructor for Savage Training Group. I teach, along with my partner, Sergeant James Tacchini, our internal affairs, officer involved shooting OIS investigation 2-day course, and all other courses for any type of law enforcement training. Again, the website is the link on the YouTube channel. And now it's time to do, my man, you know what? My not only you're a friend, but definitely you take me back to 1999 when I came on the job. And, you know, let's go from here. Thanks for coming. I appreciate it.
I'm happy to be here. I've watched what you've done, and it's an impressive podcast you got going.
Good. You know, it's one of those ideas that I had, considering I've been involved in discipline for like 12, 15 years, and a lot of conversations that we were having in these classrooms with the young sergeants, young lieutenants. I said, you know what, I got to put this on a platform because it's I know that we can get some lessons learned. So let's get right to it. Right off the bat, on a scale to 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, rate the importance of internal affairs and why.
On a scale of 1 to 10, I would say internal affairs as part of an organization is a 10. And the reason why is in order to have transparency to the public and to have credibility within the organization to the officers, and I would say even the command, you just have that component. It explains a lot of things. It provides some veracity to what we're trying to accomplish out there in the field, and it justifies our actions.
Do you feel in your 30-plus year career, and you know this pretty well, at some point someone's going to do something probably not the way that we're supposed to do it or taught to do it?
I would go with that.
Right? And then what happens is, well, yeah, we're probably going to give you training, or if it's kind of like something that's real bad, well, yeah, we're going to have to cut paper and cut a face sheet and maybe investigate misconduct.
It's a side of the it's that chapter of the LAPD, Internal Affairs. It's a necessary, and sometimes it goes awry, and that's why I feel like I'm here to maybe explain some of that.
Yes. I think one of my guests said it best. It's the necessary evil.
It is.
I've been thinking lately that when we call it the dark side, yes, it is the dark side, but it seems as though as I'm having guests come on, and the more I'm learning myself, is that, you know what, it's just part of a component of any police department, and you just hope you get some really good people that are going to investigate, you know, properly, thoroughly, with no stone goes unturned, and we'll get into that, right?
Absolutely. I think that's why Internal Affairs has the reputation of being the dark side. I obviously don't think everybody believes that 100%, but I think the dark side and the non-belief that everybody's doing it, you know, with little wings on their shoulders is also 100% true. There's a huge component of internal affairs that has been weaponized. And
yes, we'll get into that for sure. Hey, finish this sentence for me.
Sure.
As an internal affairs investigator, my job is to what?
Conduct a very thorough investigation to make sure that all avenues of the investigation have been investigated, and to do such a thorough job that the reader of the facts believes that that investigation was maximized, that you don't leave wondering, well, why didn't you go there? You know, it's kind of like a good homicide investigation. You just want to see that all the angles, 360-degree coverage. If there was if you had a camera, like, that's what he would have shown or she would have shown.
Right.
You know?
Gathering evidence is the key component.
100%. I think there should be very little room for, almost zero, for personal opinion.
Yeah. Good point. Do you feel that there's like this expectation, or should you have any expectations when you get a complaint? Oh my God, this is Chris.
I think the problem, and I'm going to keep saying the same word, the weaponization of internal affairs, is it does a disservice to the investigators. You've worked there, you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
But when I read an investigation as a supervisor and I see what internal affairs sent downstream, and the adjudication or the suspension or whatever the outcome, gosh, you just feel, and when you see the notes, you feel like that command staff really got their nose in this thing, because the investigation should have went in this direction from point A to point B, and now we're bringing up these ancillary issues that had really nothing to do with the investigation.
Yeah, it's and that's probably one of the reasons why I bring up the word expectations.
Right.
I know one of my guests, which is something I never thought about, where you get this intake, right? You're the investigating officer, and you start looking at this, and you're like, oh, it's Izzy, or oh, it's Marachi, it's Marlon, or based on personal beliefs,
Right.
Some biases, and it shouldn't be that way. Now, having said that, what I would say is, knowing Chris, Izzy, people call you Izzy, I'm thinking to myself, these allegations are just outrageous. There's just no way that Izzy would even do something like this. Now, as surprised as I might be, I'm probably going to be completely shocked if the evidence leads me to believe that these allegations are actually going to be sustained.
But that's what I'm kind of saying. If you may think something about me, and not me, but maybe another officer, and they went off the rails and swung hard left, and now they've got themselves in this predicament, it should be such a thorough investigation that when you get shocked, that you can see why that conclusion came about. Do you get what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, let's say an officer gets involved in a domestic violence incident. He was never known for that, but sometimes, for whatever reason, she got him on his best day, and now he's done something that he shouldn't have done. But the evidence is so thorough, the investigation is so thorough, that it's the only conclusion that you could have seen. And even if you're the officer that's going to get, that suffer the consequences of it, you're going to read it as that person and say, I already know what I'm going to get, because the evidence is there. Yeah, it's undeniable.
Right, and there should be accountability on your part.
Every copper knows when they do something wrong. I've got my little package. We'll have a rap sheet.
Well, you got a little rap sheet yourself.
Yeah.
But let me ask you this though: have you had partners or people that you've known where they commit misconduct, but they just don't want to own up to it? And then they feel that the department's after them, or they get disgruntled.
Well, I think they're they're trying to take the easy way out. Yeah. I would simply say, because I know your viewership's probably young people that want to come on the job or young in their career, because I'm not going to tell any older cop or something they haven't thought or know already.
Right.
But if you make a mistake or you make a bad decision, I'll let them off that way. You just need to own up to it, because you're going to. First of all, you're not the first one to do that. You're not going to be the first one to get drunk and then hit something. Why compound the problem and leave the scene?
Yeah.
Why compound the problem and try and deny your way out of it?
Been there and done that.
Oh, yeah.
No, sure. I had a case exactly under those circumstances.
Right.
Okay, let's move on to a trip down memory lane. This is always my favorite because you, along with a couple of my guests, let's see, I do know 1989. Did you, you made the 1990 cut?
I tell people I came on in the late 80s.
Let me ask you this though. Did you think like October, were you thinking, walk me through that day when you actually did you get a letter, or what was that like?
So I was down at San Diego State and probably enjoying life too much, but I knew that I always wanted to do this. My neighbor was in law enforcement, and I just grew up seeing him go to work every day, and I said, I need to do that. and I believed in it. And you know, even when I was 5 years old, I knew I wanted to do it. Part of my family grew up in a rough area, and I remember having to dive and hit the ground. And I was 5 years old, and I'm looking at my parents laying on the ground like that. I'm like, this is wrong, you know. And I said, if I ever could do something to stop that, I would try it and do it. You know, a 5-year-old thought process. You don't realize there's more factors involved, but that's where I'm at. And so when I found out in 1089, to answer your question, that I was coming on, I was relieved, because it's not easy to get on the job. It used to be, I think personally, a lot harder. The selection process is what I'm talking about. But when you finally do get to that moment, you enjoy it, kind of like you're one of the teams in the Super Bowl, but now you got to play you got to get the ring, right?
Yes.
So back then we knew we had 7-month academy, and they said, well, don't enjoy this too much, because now you got to really prove yourself.
Wow.
Yeah.
Then we're off to, let's see, I got it right here. Let's see.
Like
you went to Central Division in March 25th, 1990.
Yeah.
Then you ended up, you're still there in 91. And then here you are in West Valley in April of 1991. And voila, I got to ask, of course. I always have to ask. Rodney King.
Yeah.
Take me to the day that the verdict happened, and where were you and what's going on?
So I was working they call them specialized unit, but it was really a SPU crash unit. It's basically a problems unit, but because of the size of the division and the landscape of that division, didn't warrant a full-fledged crash unit. So it was combined effort. And, you know, we're watching these verdicts come out, and we're watching the process. And then all of a sudden, they read it out in SEME, and they told us, be ready. But you couldn't have imagined what was going to unfold. And I would say by that night, we're in front of Foothill Station. And the old Foothill Station had a 3-foot wall that ran around the perimeter of it. And news reporters are taking rocks and bottles, and officers are taking rocks and bottles. And I mean, it was going off. And we were there for the next 10, 15 hours, pushing people to the freeways, on foot, you know, running skirmish lines, what have you. And it just went on for a while.
City pretty much practically burned down.
Oh, yeah.
Wow, man. Yeah, and interesting, you talk about the young crowd that's going to be listening or watching this.
Right.
You don't remember the 1992 riots. It's a historical event in LAPD. Okay, let's move on to, I know you went to Metro. You made field training officer.
Right.
And then you ended up in Metropolitan Division as an element member. Kind of walk me through what was that like? What's the goal? Why does everybody always want to go to Metro?
So I was a training officer at Foothill Division, and I think that's where I met you.
Correct.
You had your little Ricky Martin outfit you would come to work in. But, God, you were the happiest guy in the locker room. And anyways, so you meet different people from different entities within a department. And if being a police officer is really something you wanted to do, and maybe even if you didn't, but the more you learn, you just want to be, I'm going to get some hate for this, where you think the best people are at. Whether that's detectives, that if you think that's where the best people are at, that's where you want to go.
Yeah.
I knew that some of the hardest workers that I had worked with and met were over in Metropolitan Division. I'm not saying that they're not elsewhere,
Right.
but I'm saying that's just where I thought if you want to say D1 ball was, I wanted to go there.
That's right. D1 All-American is where it's at. And interesting you say that, because even when I came on the job, it's almost like it's culture. You know,
Right.
A lot of officers, at least in my experience, the partners or people I look up to, hey, I want to get to Metro. I want to get to Metro, because there is the elite. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but walk me down to that. You have the mountain unit, and you have specialized type of details when you work a platoon, and last but not least, you have SWAT, right?
Yeah, I mean, you have the dive team, you have K9, you have a crime suppression component where, kind of like a fire crew, they'll put you in a hot area or division that's experiencing a lot of problem, and you try to bring some normalcy to the area. Right. You have SWAT. So it's hard for probably some police agencies to understand it, but you could be protecting the president one day. The Dalai Lama's coming to town. Just high visibility people, or you're doing a protection detail on a high value individual who's in court. You got to go pluck him out of prison. You got to fly him in because his life is being threatened. You're pulling him out of the shoe or whatever. Or you have dignitary protections like the ones I just mentioned.
Right.
But or you can have what they R100s or whatever, where you could have somebody's going to come and try and kidnap this individual. You got to protect the whole landscape where that person lives. So there's very few entities where you're going to get that call, and it's 24/7.
Yeah, and not many, like you said, agents even have that type of opportunity to get that type of experience. We make sergeant in 2008 here, right?
Right.
So from 2008 and for the next, until you retired, you were sergeant.
Right.
You ended up in Newton Division, and you came back to mission as an assistant watch commander. What was that like?
So being an assistant watch commander, you're just spinning a lot of plates. I ended up becoming a sergeant 2 there, or being a watch commander. But you never really see the lieutenant. I mean, they're so busy.
Right.
But you're really kind of every division within itself. What do we have? 26 now.
Yeah, something like that.
So you're kind of the chief of police for that given geographic area division.
You're steering the ship.
And you don't really want to make the call uphill because one, it kind of seems like you can't handle what you're doing, and the other because something's gotten so catastrophic bad that this chief or whoever's going to be reading it on the news in 5 minutes. So you want to handle your division, and if you need to get outside resources, you want to do it. So it's a good challenge, but it's a lot of work. So I enjoyed it, but I always want to get back to Metro.
And you did?
Yes.
Okay. And when you went back to Metro, what did you end up doing?
So I returned to the a crime suppression unit, and which is a pretty cool detail. You could work in both capacities, uniform and plainclothes, depending on the kind of detail you're doing. Plainclothes, say there's 40 burglaries in a given area, you could set up a plainclothes detail with 20, 30 coppers. It's huge.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then what I ended up doing was they had a little version of it before, but it was a crime impact team.
Okay.
And you're part of a federal joint task force with the federal government, ATF, and you go and your main focus is solving violent crime. A lot of your police chiefs will talk about the top 10% offenders in any city are the ones creating all the havoc. So let's say that there was a homicide string of robberies.
Okay.
So I would deploy our surveillance team, get all the facts, work with the detectives from a geographic division, let all the results or the investigative leads materialize to point us in a direction where we thought we could have success finding him, whether it be in the commission of the crime. Hopefully not. We want to get him out. Obviously, we don't want to harm other people, but you are playing you're playing the odds. Where would he most likely be? There's some suspects that take off their license plate on some investigations we did, and they rob a bank only on Thursdays. So we would sit in there, and you don't really have an ID on the suspect, but you have an ID on the vehicle. So we know he always hits on a Thursday. He always takes off his license plate. And sure enough, there he is. He's unscrewing the license plate, taking it off. So now you've got units at the bank. You've got an airship. You've got all the resources in play. And we got him. That's what you do. It was like a TV show without commercials. So you always want to do that stuff.
Man. Yeah, it's hard to give up.
It is. It's addicting, really.
Yes. It's so addicting to the point where you just said, you know what, no more, and you called it quits when?
In January 2021.
Yeah. How many years?
Just shy of 32. I'd have to do the math, but
it's over 30.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, thank you for your service. I only lasted 24. 30 seems real long. I suppose I wanted to do 30, but I know the drop program and the whole nine, and that's good stuff. Look, now let's get to what we're really, really here for. Sure. It is an internal affairs podcast show, and I know that you have a story to share regarding internal affairs, and let's try to get some lessons learned, man. I'll leave the floor up to you.
I mean, I could talk about this a lot. So I've been a part of, the harder you work, I believe, the more you're going to get complaints. because that's an avenue that somebody who doesn't like the police can take to try. They're trying to hinder your ability to catch them dirty. They're trying to hinder your activities. So if they put a beef on you, we call it a beef, or a 181 or a 128, whatever it is, they will put these things. And I'll just real quickly say that's why complaints are like uses of force. If people realized how many uses of force we get in versus the number of police activities on a daily basis, it's less than 0.1%. It's the same thing with complaints. Complaints, by their very nature, I would say 99%, you work there, so tell me if I'm wrong, aren't legitimate complaints.
They're not.
So in the span of 32 years, we'll use the round number.
Let's do it.
I have 30 complaints.
30 complaints.
30 complaints.
Okay.
You
What
know,
else did you jotted down over there?
Well, I had 4 categorical uses of force.
Okay, so
31
those are-
pursuits.
Okay.
15 traffic collisions, but only 2 of them were my fault. Let's just get that out there. And then on the flip side, that's the dark side. On the flip side, 200 accommodations, over 200, and Medal of Valor and whatever. But only 4 suspension days. That might look bad, I would think, to the new guy who wants to be the police chief, or maybe even more. But 30 complaints over a 32-year period, I would say that's kind of navigating the waters pretty good.
I agree. That's not even including your probationary time or being
When you
in the
factor
academy.
in how easy it is to make a bogus complaint by what you and I were just talking about.
Yes, 100%.
That's pretty good.
That is pretty good. You experienced something in Foothill. I know you and I talked about this. I think there's some lessons learned there. Talk to me about the time when you were in Foothill, and you, I suppose it was a recovered vehicle or something along those lines.
I was wondering which one you were going with. So basically, I happened to be walking by the front desk, and somehow it became apparent that a sheriff had their car. They went to take somebody into custody on the freeway for whatever reason. They have him handcuffed, and he's able to fight back with the deputy, and able to break the handcuffs and get back in his car and take off. We learned about it. We found out where it happened. It was by Juvenile Hall, Yarnell and 210 Freeway.
Okay.
So we, being the coppers we are, we're like, oh, we want to help our brothers, right?
Yes.
And because the fraternity is tight.
Yes.
So when we found out about that, we set up on it. We kind of checked the area, and then lo and behold, I forget, it's been so many years, but basically, I think a citizen alerted us that an abandoned vehicle was left in a driveway. But we were in the right area, but it just kind of led us there. We take the vehicle, we recover the vehicle, and I make the call to call the deputy, because we're proud of ourselves. It was a good caper, team effort, and we wanted to see him get his justice. And the deputies said, what do you like to drink? And I said, well, kind of privy to beer at that point in my career. And he says, we got you covered. I'm telling you, the closest police station is either Santa Clarita or La Crescenta. They had to have rolled code 3. They were there in 10 minutes with a case of beer. I'm a family-oriented copper. It took me 5 seconds to call everybody and say, I got beer after work, we're good. And they delivered that beer. I can't believe I'm going to tell you the story. But I think people realize that you can get yourself into trouble, just get yourself out of it.
Of course.
So what happened is, it was kind of at the time where the jail was under construction, but the fridge was still working.
Love it.
So
I love it.
we put it in the jail fridge. So coppers are very family oriented.
Yes.
It's like going to a Mexican baptism. It might be for a 1-year-old, but everybody wants to bring something. Word got out, and everybody's going to their sources, and everybody's getting whiskey, whatever it is. And it turned into a party. And, coppers don't really get in trouble because of their actions. They get in trouble because of somebody else's actions.
Very true.
Because you can't control that.
Right.
So there was some kind of a dispute, a love triangle within the division. It exploded, and somebody started saying, well, you were over there, and they tattled on us, and we got in trouble and it went downhill. There was probably 10 of us. And I'll tell you what, lesson learned. We ended up getting interviewed. I pushed back a little bit, and I
By Internal Affairs?
Yeah, because they said, hey, they called me in, we're getting interviewed. And they said, hey, we know you were there. We have all the names. Were you drinking here? I wasn't really being a smart ass, but I want a thorough investigation. They said, you were drinking in the park. I said, actually, I was not. I was drinking outside the park, but we were drinking along the gate. But to me, it was going to be a different charge if you're drinking in within city limits versus in a county park. So, I risked it, and I don't know if they can do it. Yeah, they probably do it now. They call a timeout. We all go meet, and they go, look, if you just tell the truth, this is probably an admonishment. Mm-hmm. The supervisor is probably going to take the hit that went with you guys over there. So just I go, I am telling the truth. I wasn't there. I can take you and show you. They go, don't make us work harder. So we go there, and if you look on my complaint history, there's a drinking in public or some kind of complaint. Now, here's the shady part of internal affairs. There is a hidden parole status. And for although it showed, how does it show on there? You have the complaint history. I was on parole for 5 years. I couldn't promote. I barely couldn't transfer anywhere. And it puts your career on freeze. And it's not supposed to be that way. And here's why. People in LA can shoot at somebody, miss, use deadly force. They can probably rob a bank nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely.
You will not get a 5-year sentence. So coppers like me, for other stuff unrelated like that, you can still get this hidden parole status, and you can't go anywhere for 5 years.
Where do you think that culture started this parole status? I mean, you've been around. Is it something that maybe it could have been maybe one of your FTOs, one of your field training officers told you, hey, I was paroled, or it's just something that just happens not just so much in LAPD, it probably happens in other agencies. Wouldn't you agree, or what's your thoughts on that?
I just think that the upper echelon, the command staff, this is the weaponization that I keep talking about.
Yeah.
They want to show that they have career aspirations. They want to promote, right? And I think it's almost like they try to outdo each other. Oh. And so when this hidden parole status comes about, and you can go ask them nowadays, some of them will deny it. Some will go, yeah, I was a victim of it too, but you just learn and you move on. And I fell victim to that. It was my fault. Let me get that out there. It was my fault. But I just don't know if that rose to a 5-year stall of your career.
Yeah. Did it almost seem to you that your reputation, your character just kind of didn't even come into play?
Yeah, I don't think the hard work came into play. I don't think the package that I was building to go into Metro, and back then, you couldn't even work mid-PM watch if your package, you weren't leading an arrest or you weren't being that kind of an officer. So I don't know. It's just weird to me that it's been allowed to go on for so long. It's almost like the secret LA Confidential of the LAPD.
And speaking of weaponization, and the light bulb just turned on right now, should there be any parole status when it comes to complaints? Let me couch it this way. Should there be parole on certain allegations, in your opinion? Or should there just be no parole, period?
I think if there's a pattern of behavior, then maybe that would warrant itself. That would add some credibility to that. But I just don't think that drinking off duty with 5 of your 10 of your buddies, granted in a closed park, because that's really what the crime was, rose to, it didn't match the crime in my book. And I don't think I'm being unreasonable with that.
No, I don't think so either.
But to me, it's just interesting when you see command staff going to a retirement party in a city vehicle and driving, and they've gotten caught because they've hit something, and they go to sleep that night and they're a Captain 3, and then the next day they wake up, they're a deputy chief or something like that. Yeah. That just rubs you wrong, because coppers don't want to be treated special. They just want fairness and equity.
Good point to your fairness and equity in your career. Have you seen that fairness and equity?
Yes.
Meaning,
I mean, I've seen it sometimes. I'm not
Okay.
going to sit here and
Right.
say that the whole thing's bad.
no, but there is a double standard. I can agree
It's
with
a
you.
huge
with
double
that.
standard. So I don't know if you remember this when you came on. It was kind of fading when you came on,
Mm-hmm.
but you used to come into roll call, and part of roll call, when they had real ones back then,
Mm-hmm.
is they would read what was called the rap sheet. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember the rap
So
sheet.
they would read it. It would come out kind of quarterly or every 3 months, and
Mm-hmm.
you would read it, and it was the list of complaints taken within that time span. And it was actually kind of a good training tool. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know why they got away with it, but they would read it and they would say, they would never give the officer's name. Officer A, domestic violence incident.
Mm-hmm.
And then the watch commander would lean over and he goes, what do you think? First offense. And they'd say 6 month suspension. But we would guess. And then the next one would be off-duty officer, DUI. What did he get? And back then it was got a contract, which means you couldn't drink for a specified period of time. But we would guess. But it was part entertainment, but it was also one of the best reminders of why you shouldn't do something.
Right.
And I don't know why we got away from that invasion of privacy, but we didn't give names.
Right.
But it was such a cool tool.
Right.
You know, it was a fun way to reinforce why you shouldn't do things wrong.
Going back to your sustained admonishment, it says alcohol-related issues. I mean, let's call it what it is. Was it sustained, according to that allegation?
Yes.
Okay. And well, it's the penalty. Let me ask you this. Let's talk about the process. How did you feel like you were treated like? What did they, meaning internal affairs, when here they are?
I mean, we all get called in. We get interviewed separately. They wanted us. It was kind of funny. It was like almost like a gang shooting. They wanted us to all give each other's names up. And I said, I was there. I'm admitting to it. That's all I'm really giving you. That's all I'm required to do. And I just wasn't going to do it. And pretty much everybody followed that line. I mean, we all it all turned into the prison yard mentality. But that's what we did. But I know this is your show, but how many beers do you think I drank that caused me to not promote for 5 years?
Oh, I don't know, 2?
It was freezing cold. You can go back to that date. It was 36, 39 degrees out there, and we left after. We just got so cold. I remember one guy was wearing his daughter's 3-year-old sweater on one arm and her other sweater on another because it was so cold, and we left. But had that incident of the little love triangle not taken place, nobody would have known. 2 beers, 5 years.
2 beers, 5 years. You know, I think I'm going to write that down. I'm going to use that as the thumbnail. 2 beers, 5 years. The double standard, I really have witnessed being in internal affairs, where I can tell you, and you know, sometimes it's I hate to be a little harsh, because I am an alum, and to make it even worse, I'm not just an alum of LAPD, but I'm an internal affairs alum, and I've seen. The sad part about it, what I'm trying to say is that there is no parity. There is no blanket, hey, if someone commits a neglect of duty in Devonshire Division and someone commits a neglect of duty in Southwest, it should, circumstances being similar, right?
Right.
You should be rendering, sustained, it happened, got it. But when we start talking about penalty, let's try to make it, balance as much as possible. And, and what's your take on that? Because I know I haven't seen, and you were a sergeant in Mission Division and Metro 2, and I'm sure that you've seen the discipline go up and down. And
it's infuriating because as a supervisor, I would see officers out there doing the hard work. I work with a bunch of solid guys, and, these things can happen, situations can happen. And just to see the way some of these investigations are done, and I don't want to broad brush it. There are great investigators in internal affairs.
Absolutely.
They're perfect for that role. But there's ones that take it, I think, personal, or they have a cause. And, well, if you're this race of an officer, I bet you're probably lying. I'm sure you've hit people before. That's not really what that's designed for.
Right.
And then where it gets really bad is, I can't give out names because I don't want to end up in court here, but
Right.
when you have a commander or whoever in the upper echelons and he's using his cell phone to take inappropriate pictures, and you don't ever hear of him getting fired, suspended, whatever, but an officer over here does it and they want to put him in prison. Or a commanding officer is driving down the freeway covering their license plate in an HOV lane, and by the way, it's a city vehicle. Why are they not fired? You would fire a P2.
Right.
Shouldn't the commander know even more than that P2 with, a year and 2 months on the job?
Oh, absolutely.
Wouldn't that set the example?
Yeah, it's a higher leadership role.
Right.
Absolutely.
Well, how does he adjudicate? I want to know, how does he adjudicate penalties coming across his desk?
Yeah, and that's the unfortunate part about this big machine.
Right.
Is sometimes you'll do something in which the penalty probably wasn't what it should be, and then next thing you know, here you are adjudicating these complaints. That doesn't sit well with a lot of people.
Well, when an officer arrests somebody for, and this is probably a bad example in Gascon's time because he's ruining the city, but
yes.
But when an officer typically used to, under perfect circumstances, bring in somebody for a robbery, there was a certain bail schedule, and and the penal code would tell you, 5 years in prison, that would be the top lid, the bottom lid would be, 1 year jail or whatever. But I almost think the only way you're going to cleanse the department's internal affairs thing is to have a bail schedule. That way there's an expectation that it's being handled fairly. And until we do that, and until we take the upper command's influence out of an investigation, it will never get healed.
Yeah, that's what I call the influence peddling. It happens all the time. It's real. It's unfortunate that it still continues. And again, I also want to make clear that when we start talking about these type of examples, scenarios, things that have happened, things that you've seen,
Right.
Without naming any names whatsoever, it's a small fraction. I mean, let's keep in mind
Right.
that we come from at one point we were at 10,000 strong, so we're talking about a very, very small fraction of 0.1%.
Right.
Which, by the way, it's sensationalized. It really sticks out, especially to your point when it goes from, hey, I'm an officer and I get involved in a DUI and I do all this shady stuff to try to get out of it, and it happens to a command staff officer. For whatever reason, there's no parity.
Right. And you're smarter than I am. I don't know how you could fix that. Maybe an outside entity should handle upper command investigations. I don't know. I don't know how you can take out the command staff putting their personal touch on it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. You know what? Good point, Chris. I've been trying to figure that out myself, where when I do teach at Savage Training Group in the internal affairs portion, day one, in small agencies, what I try to do is see if somehow, some way, especially internal, internal type of allegations are the worst. The worst in the sense that it's not just preponderance. Let's not think about 51% more likely than not. Let's crank that up and say, look, if you're really making this type of allegation against one of your coworkers, you better have a lot of evidence.
Yes.
And so what happens is that, yeah, in a big machine like LAPD, I would love to have an independent and outsource this to a private firm. With small agencies, when I teach, what I try to tell them is like, look, maybe a chief of a small agency calls the neighboring city chief, right, the chief of police, and says, hey, do me a solid, and can you get your best sergeant to actually investigate this?
Right. But here's the problem, or here's the rub, though. Just your example. What if they're really good friends? Well, how do you want this? There's that element of it. But here's a telling example that I think is really interesting. So a couple of years ago, they went to a civilian on the board, right? Why does that bother so much of the upper brass in the LAPD? Because it eliminated their personal touch.
Yes.
Didn't it?
Yes. Were you going to say something else? Or no. Well, contradictory to that is when you have an all-civilian board we know that we, meaning the rank and file, know that our chances at this border rights hearing with an all civilian board are going to turn out in our favor because they're very flexible.
Well, I think that our stakeholders, our community members, they look at it from a very common sense standpoint.
Right. Lens.
Right. And it's very 2020 to them. I have an officer. I need him in the field. We've spent $150,000 to put a recruit through the academy. I need my officers out there. What did he do wrong? And they look at it in a real world example. Mm-hmm. He drank 2 beers. Now, there was talk they wanted us 10, 15 day suspension.
Wow.
You know, back then.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they could have been pumping their chest, but that was the conversation.
Wow.
And so if you have a hard charger and you have a hard worker, do you really want that guy sat down for 5 years?
Yeah.
I would venture to say the average citizen who, you know, is looking at this thing from the metrics of what are we trying to accomplish here is saying, I think that's absurd. So I think it scares the command that a common sense look at things, and it takes their element out of it, and they like to have their hands in everything.
Yeah, and just to also add to that is there is, and again, it's a very, very small fraction of cases by the traditional panel in a border rights hearing, 2 command staff officers and a civilian, where, believe it or not, it is difficult to get them, you know, and I'm putting on my prosecution hat to let them know that this guy's bad news, man. He's a bad apple, and they don't bite, and it doesn't happen. So that's part of the frustration. And again, it's a small fraction.
Right. I mean, the only reason we're really putting this much light on it is because of what you're doing here. But, you know, here's another part of it. I'm just thinking because I haven't really had to process it. Military endorsements.
Yes.
I mean,
it's a military thing.
That is just the dirtiest move you can do.
It is.
So 10 people have reviewed this thing, and then the chief walks in, you know, he's been out with, you know, schmoozing, and they say give him a warning or whatever, and he's like 5-10 days, or send him to border rights.
Yeah.
And you're like, how did 10 people, 10 different levels of review, people that don't work with each other on a daily basis, because it went from a division to the bureau to, you know, the steps.
Yes.
And
levels
then
of
he
review.
comes along, and if it's true, he reviewed it for 10 minutes, or his adjutant reviewed it, and it's been given that inflection, and now he's changed this guy's whole life, her whole life.
Yeah.
No paycheck.
And it works the other way too.
Right.
But it works both ways.
Yeah.
And he only gets like not even 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Someone's just got to go in there and say, hey, give me this. What do you think? And you're 100% spot on. There is situations where all these levels of review is like, well, we thought this out. It's been so thoroughly thought out with 10 days. And he comes in, he goes, no, this just should be an R. It should be an admonishment.
It's bizarre. My officers would do great work. They'd get into use of force. Here's a P2, and for the viewers, that's a officer who's basically out of the academy. Mm-hmm. They could have 30 years to be a P2, but
a working dog.
Yeah, but they're sitting in an office, and we've seen them. It's a 2-year cop in there that's reading this use of force, saying he should have used a baton strike. This officer's never even been in the field. They went straight from the academy, past probation, and now they're inside in a day job. And I'm like, how are you? You've never even been there. How are you suggesting what he should have done with 5 guys fighting him?
Yeah. You know what? It's I can take away from all this. It's not perfect.
No.
Right. We're long gone from the machine, but you would hope that the machine gets better. And it's good lessons learned, man. I really enjoy the conversation because we can really have a lot of examples where, it is good or it is bad, and we move on. So
I think this is why your vehicle here is so important, because who else is talking about it?
Yeah.
Who else? 2 coppers grumbling in the front seat because it went sideways? No, you're praying that some commander's watching this, some captain's watching it, some lieutenant, and even younger coppers, so they learn to protect themselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. We're missing, that's a missing piece. That's the reason for the platform. And thank you for that. I really appreciate that. Okay. Worst and best. Give me worst scenario, incident, something that happened that just sticks out that you can think of.
You know, we're in the business. There's a lot of worst. So to try and put one in in one category,
I've realized that.
So I'll answer it like this. So it's really good coppers. They responded to child abuse, and this guy was putting drill marks with a drill into this kid, making him live in a closet. And if he cried or had to use the bathroom, he was about 6'7", and he would full on kick this kid in the crotch for having to use the bathroom. When the officers came in, he was going to take scissors to his testicles, and he was making cigarette burns with him on other occasions. They took him to the burn center. I mean, the fact that these two officers were able to get there and save this little one, I mean, it's just anything with kids just gut wrenches me. And, you know, that's the darkest side, I think, of the department. But okay, so there's that. But then the other one that I'll always carry is there was we had an officer from another agency. Him and his partner went to do a follow-up, and it was in a warehouse. And the security guard basically lied, said that nobody was there, so they wanted to do a walkthrough for whatever. The problem is, I don't think that they for sure notified the division they were in that they were there. So as the situation unfolds, the suspect's actually there. He's got high ground, and he shot down him. They didn't even know he's there. They didn't even know there was a second floor in a warehouse, and that officer died. And you know, life comes and goes in seconds, and that's just that we couldn't get there. You know,
That's
you
tragic.
never want to know or think that your brother officer, how long he laid there wondering if help's on the way.
Yeah.
That's just brutal.
Yeah. You know, thanks for sharing that, man, because I can tell you, you know, thank God I haven't been in a situation where I had to go and help my partner officer, and when I get there, you know, they pass away and they get killed. Whew, that's a good one. Okay. Best. Tell me what stands out in this 30-year career.
I think that stands out is, you know, I said fraternity earlier. It's just a remarkable career. There's very few careers that you can come across people, and the probationer. You know, I was known as more of a tougher training officer, but I would get some of them, and I'd say, "What crime have you never investigated?" And they would say, "A burglar." I've never done a burglary. So I would teach them how to find a burglary suspect. We'd find it. And someone would say, "I don't know." And I said, "Well, crack that penal code open." And they just flip it open. I go, "Whatever crime we find, you land on, we're going to go find that." And it could have been a GTA. It could have been a guy, you know, whatever. And we would work towards that. And to see them work the investigation, get that process their first time, that to me was rewarding. And then on the flip side, when I left this career doing surveillance, these characters I worked with, and they were characters. I miss the clowns, not the circus, because I had a great career. And these guys, the way they would run these investigations, when you can amaze, I don't need to be amazed, but when you sit back there and you watch something come to fruition, where somebody's been robbing 20 cellular stores, or this guy's been robbing 30 people, and these guys put this case together, and they go mobile, and they're doing surveillance, 10-car surveillance units, whatever, and they are walking to places you wouldn't even walk on your own, and they're doing it by themselves, and they make this materialize. It's just amazing.
Couldn't have said any better, man.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. Look, we're almost at the end. Parting words, man. This is the part where, look, I know you're enjoying retirement, you know, enjoying life finally. You certainly, truly deserve it after everything you've put in for the city of Los Angeles, for that matter. But what would you tell a young officer, we just touched on this earlier, a young sergeant or a young lieutenant, someone that's trying to make command staff, whoever's listening, you know, what kind of advice would you give them about this career?
That's a lot of pressure, because there's a lot of retired coppers watching this thing. I would say for a new copper, being a police officer is not a part-time job. It's not something that you really clock in and you clock out. I know people say leave it at work, separate it. That's true. For your mental capacity, that's true. But you as a new officer, before you come on, and even when you are on the job, you're brand new, never stop learning. The department will never give you enough training. If you need to take shooting classes, tactical classes, you take them. If you got money for Baker to Vegas to spend 3 nights in a hotel over there, then you have money to go get shooting and training. Yes. If you need better report writing skills, you go and do that. Take a class at the JC. Don't wait for this department to teach you or any agency across the U.S. to teach you. You have to go after it. There's so much to learn.
That's awesome.
The more you know, the more fun you're going to have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
My parting words about you, Izzy, is yes, you had the reputation of being a hard-nosed field training officer, an FTO, and my best friend who influenced me to come on the job told me all about you. When I got to Foothill, I suppose you were on your parole.
Yeah.
You were on your parole status, so I didn't get you. But you know what? We became friends, and I'll never forget this. As it talks about the impression of people. I had this impression of you being this, really tough, hard-nosed, FTO firm and all that good stuff. But we ended up, going out. I think one time we had a couple of beers with my buddies, kicking back in the back seat. We go to the club, and you know what? I had no idea how much fun we actually had.
We did have fun. All I can say about those ones that said I was tough, I was. Because I expected you to keep you alive. My probation had to keep you alive. They had to be able to work with the other officers. And the ones that had it really tough, their expectation was from some of their training officers who didn't ask anything of them. So if that was your expectation coming in, then I would say, yeah, you were in for a big surprise.
Yeah.
So.
I love it. I love it. Hey, man, look, I'm MC, right?
Yep. I have a lot of brothers and sisters on this job, happily married. So any of the guys, they can come on over. I don't need to bring sand to the beach because it's good. But you're more than welcome. There's always a room for you.
Thank you.
Seriously.
Man. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for showing up. We're going to wrap it up. Izzy, thank you so much for sharing all these stories. And that's going to be it. And of course, like always, please just be safe out there and don't forget to go Code 6. Thank you.